I used to work the night shift at a 24-hour gas station just off a rural stretch of highway in Pennsylvania. It wasn't a busy place, especially between 1 and 4 a.m., so corporate didn't see the point in having more than one person on duty during those hours. Just me, the register, and the occasional trucker looking for coffee. There was one rule though: never go into the lot out back after midnight. Not a superstition or anything like that. It was written into the actual training binder under safety protocols. It said something vague like access to back lot restricted between 12 a.m. and 6 a.m. due to prior incidents. No one ever explained what those incidents were. The day manager just shrugged when I asked and said it's a weird spot. Don't overthink it. So I didn't, at least not until the third week of my shift, when I noticed the car. It was an old silver sedan with no plates, just sitting at the edge of the back lot, headlights off, facing the dumpsters. It wasn't there when I started my shift at 10. It wasn't there at midnight either. And yet there it was, parked just inside the tree line like it was hiding. At first, I thought maybe someone just pulled into sleep. It wasn't unusual, truckers did it all the time. But they usually stayed out front, closer to the pumps. Easier to roll out and get back on the road. This car, though, didn't move. It just sat there, completely dark. I watched it for maybe 5 minutes from behind the register, then went back to restocking cigarettes. But when I looked again 15 minutes later, it was still there. Still off. Still empty. Or, I assumed it was empty. I couldn't see inside with how the lot lights hit the windshield. Around 2:20 a.m. I decided to call it in. Not 911, just the local non-emergency number. Figured maybe a patrol car could check it out just in case it was stolen or something. The woman on the other end took down the info and said they'd send someone when they could. Rural town, middle of the night, it might be an hour, maybe more. About 10 minutes later, I heard the door chime. Someone came in. He was average height, wearing a gray hoodie with the hood up. No eye contact, no greeting. Just walked straight to the coolers in the back. That's not what caught my attention though. It was his shoes. I'd seen them before, mud-caked, torn along the heel. Same exact pair I noticed sticking out from the driver's side of that car when I glanced through the window earlier. I kept my eye on him while pretending to rearrange some gum packs under the counter. He was slow, deliberate. Didn't grab a drink. Didn't even open a cooler. Just walked along the back wall, then up one of the aisles, like he was browsing but not really looking at anything. Then he paused by the coffee machine. Still didn't pour a cup, just stood there. I couldn't see his face, just a rough profile under the hood. He finally picked up a packet of sugar and started turning it in his fingers real slow, like he had all the time in the world. "Hey, you all right?" I called out, trying to sound casual. He didn't answer. Didn't look up, just kept turning the sugar packet in his hand like it was a stress toy. And then he did something that made my stomach tighten. He looked straight at the security camera above the counter, not at me, at the camera, and smiled. A full smile, wide and slow, like he was trying to prove a point. Then he walked straight toward the register. No drink, no snacks, nothing in his hands except that sugar packet. He set the sugar packet on the counter, looked up, and said, "Can I use your bathroom?" His voice was flat, totally neutral, like someone reading from a script. I nodded, trying to keep my expression unreadable. "He's on the hook," I said, gesturing toward the wall behind me. Except it wasn't. The key wasn't there. It was always there. He didn't turn to look, just stared at me like he already knew it wasn't. "That's all right," he said. "I'll just wait." And then, without another word, he walked over to the small seating area near the window, sat down, and stared out at the pumps like he was waiting for someone to arrive. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to confront him, but something about him was off. Not drunk, not high, just wrong, like his whole presence was slightly misaligned. I called the non-emergency line again. Told them the guy from the car might be inside now. The woman on the line sounded different this time, more alert. She asked if the man had said anything threatening. I told her no, not yet.
Stay inside. Lock the doors if you can. We've got a unit nearby.
She hung up before I could ask how long nearby meant. And then, just as I put the phone down, I heard a second ding. The door opened again. A second man walked in. Same hoodie, same mud-covered shoes, but this one was holding the bathroom key. The second man walked in like he belonged there, like it was just a normal night for him. No hesitation, no weird glances. He walked right up to the counter, dropped the key, and gave me the same dead stare as the first guy. "Bathroom's open," he said flatly, like I hadn't even asked. The first guy is still sitting in the chair, still staring out the window, didn't even acknowledge him. No change in his posture, no flicker of recognition. For a second, I thought about locking the door, just bolting it shut. But I didn't. I felt paralyzed, unsure of how to handle it. The whole situation felt wrong, like I was an actor in a play and had forgotten my lines. I could still hear the second guy's footsteps as he walked toward the back hallway, but I didn't follow him. My eyes were glued to the first one, still seated and still staring out the window. That's when the door chime went off again. Another person. This time it was a woman, a figure in a black coat. But she didn't come in, she just stood at the door, glancing in. The moment I saw her, I felt the weight of the entire situation shift. There was a look of recognition in her eyes as she glanced briefly at the men, but then her gaze turned straight to me, and for a split second, I could have sworn she looked worried, almost pleading. I opened my mouth to speak, but before I could get anything out, she turned and walked away. I stood frozen for a few moments, wondering if I should go after her or just wait. The atmosphere had completely shifted, the air felt heavier, charged in a way I couldn't explain. I looked back at the two men. The first one hadn't moved. The second one had returned from the bathroom, but instead of heading straight for the door, he was standing by the coolers now, acting like he was debating whether or not to grab something. I forced myself to keep my voice steady. "You need anything?" The first man finally stood, his slow movements deliberate. He didn't answer, but started walking toward the door. That's when I saw the second man glance at him. A quick, sharp look, like they had just exchanged some unspoken cue. It hit me then, they were working together. My heart pounded as I watched them. As the first man reached the door, the second one suddenly turned and said, "We're not done yet." I stared at him, confused, but before I could process the words, the first man slammed the door open and bolted. I don't know how long I stood there, trying to wrap my head around it. I heard the rumble of an engine starting outside, then nothing. The second man just stared at me, his eyes cold and distant. Then, after a long moment, he turned, walked toward the door, and let himself out. I didn't move until I saw the patrol car pull up to the lot. I ran outside, shaking, but by the time I got to the lot, the sedan and the two men were gone. The officer who pulled up was a young guy, looked barely out of high school. I told him everything. Every detail, from the first guy walking in to the second man coming out of the bathroom to the woman at the door. He listened quietly, but when I finished, he didn't immediately respond. He just stood there for a second, looking out at the empty lot. "Did you get their plates?" he asked, finally. I shook my head. There were no plates. "The car in the back lot." "Yeah," he interrupted, nodding. "It's been here a couple times before." I stared at him, not sure what he meant. He didn't elaborate. "Nothing to worry about," he said. "They're probably just people passing through. Nothing criminal here." I felt a rush of frustration. "But he raised a hand, cutting me off. "We'll check the cameras, but this is a small town. We've got it under control." I wanted to press him more, but something in his voice made me stop. He turned and walked back to his car, leaving me with the unsettling feeling that he already knew something I didn't. The next day, the gas station owner, who had been absent the night before, asked if anything had happened during my shift. He didn't seem too concerned, just casual. When I mentioned the two men and the strange encounter, he went pale for a moment, but quickly recovered. "Just make sure you're not out back late again," he said, with a forced laugh. "We had some issues with people squatting in the lot last month. Nothing to get worked up about, though." I wanted to ask more, but he turned to leave. I never saw the men again. But every time I worked the night shift after that, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched.